Talking about squat depth and improving your squat mechanics, especially if you're having low back pain, one of the core concepts here is trying to keep a vertical bar path. So if you want to record yourself from the side here to get this, right? Once we unrack the bar and take whatever our walkout is and our stance, you want to try to keep the bar path on the eccentric and concentric to be mostly vertical over your foot, right? So that's what this looks like. I'm keeping the bar mostly vertical and balanced over my midfoot as I'm doing the repetition, right? So a lot of times, if you're struggling with that depth with the vertical bar path, you'll see people sort of turn the squat into a good morning to where they're leaning more vertical or more forward, and the bar is traveling more forward over your foot. So when you're doing that, you're turning the squat to be more knee dominant, sitting upright and letting your knees move forward, into more of a good morning, which is putting more stress on your lower back, and you're having more pelvic tilt, which isn't a good or a bad thing by itself, but if you're having pain with this and you're able to sit more upright into the squat, that'll probably translate more to having less back pain and a more balanced squat. So a lot of that comes down to technique modifications and getting more skilled with the movement. And there are some things we can do to help that. But the first would be just practicing with the bar on your back. When the bar is on your shoulders, on your back, it changes your center of mass, center of gravity. And it's different than just squatting with your body weight. So the first thing is working with the tempo and range of motion that you're comfortable with. What that might look like, at least at first, is a tempo squat. Just to the range of motion, you start to feel like you're tipping forward and your hips are going back. So that could be, half of a repetition at first as you get used to it. And that tempo could be 2 seconds on the way down, holding that position where you're starting to get uncomfortable, and then back up. And over time, we can gradually expand that range of motion. The other thing to consider too with at least the squat depth is where you're allowing your hips to move. So if you have a more vertical, a more closed stance like this, as you squat down, naturally your knees have to travel very far forward and out to get down to that depth. And that's going to be uncomfortable for most people. You're not going to have the ankle mobility to do it. So from a back view, to be able to hit that depth, what you do have to do is have some sort of combination of hip external rotation as you're squatting, right? So that could look like opening your hips up to sit down between your hips and back up. So other than some tempo work with the bar action on your back, with a weight that you're not having any increase in symptoms and you can fully control that position, there are some other drills you can do as supplements to build that mobility and that technique. First great drills to work on your squat mobility is having some sort of stable surface you can sit on at or around the depth that's uncomfortable for you, or even at full depth. So I've got a medicine ball here. Some other things you could use are like a milk crate, different height medicine balls, or different height benches, something that's just stable. So if you can imagine getting your butt directly over that object that you're gonna squat to, and I wouldn't work on using the bar on your back for this, at least at first, and then you're going to squat down to that object to where you're actually sitting on it, and then actually practice bringing your chest more upright and allowing your balance to be over the middle of your foot and controlling that squat. So if we did that from the side, let's say you're someone who's having trouble with that vertical, keeping a vertical torso, and you squat down, and to that point you feel like you're starting to lose it and cave back. It gives you a good opportunity to at least stay more upright, sit down to it, and practice shifting your knees forward and keeping your pelvis from tilting and rotating underneath you. So that would definitely be more tempo work, allowing your knees to come forward, sitting between your hips. And once you get to the point where you feel like you're tipping back, forcibly bring your chest up and come down underneath like this to sit on the squat, and then back up. That could even be a good opportunity, if you have to to use something supportive like an upright and not pulling on it, but just lightly resting your fingers here. That way when you get to the point where you feel like you're going to lose that technique and that brace of being more upright, to forcibly push your knees forward and sit down into it here. Then as you get more comfortable doing that lower to sit on its surface, you can start doing things like goblet squat holds, to where you're holding a counterweight in front of you and sitting down into the squat and then coming up. So that's from the front view. And then as you can see from the side, right, we're still keeping that vertical torso sitting down between our hips, allowing our knees to move forward as your hips open to get down into that squat. So always though, remember, keep the range of motion to wherever you're being slightly challenged and gradually look to expand that over time. Another excellent drill too to work on your hip mobility and opening your hips up is getting down into a lunge hip shift, to where you're opening your hips to the side, putting the weight against your leg here to open your hip up as you move that direction, and working on keeping your chest vertical and allowing your hip to open up to do the range of motion, rather than bending forward with your back and having your back do it. So there's a big difference in opening your hip to get that range of motion while keeping your pelvis completely in between you versus allowing your pelvis to move forward with you. Something else to consider too when you're working on your squat and your squat depth and mobility, especially in the context of having back pain, is what your actual bracing is due. So I'm gonna keep my shirt tucked in here to show you. And a lot of people, bracing is like thinking about contracting everything, but try to think of it more in terms of like positioning and your depth of your squat and demonstrating strength in those depths, right? Because that's what mobility actually is. Your ability to demonstrate strength through whatever range of motion you're moving through, right? So I'm gonna get into my squat stance here, and hopefully you can see a little bit of what my rib cage is doing, right? But when I'm coming down here, I'm not trying to really tilt my pelvis back and arch my upper back here and my lower back to get this depth, right? That's okay, but if you're having pain with it, maybe a better way to think about this is just trying to keep your ribs down and in a line over the middle of your feet, right? So I'm bringing my rib cage in, and I'm not really valsalving too much to brace the entire way. I'm just thinking about keeping control of what my upper back and my rib cage is doing here, right? So I'm staying down here as I'm coming down into the squat, and naturally the bar goes over my middle foot. So there's a huge difference between here and squatting to get down to that depth and tilting your pelvis versus keeping things just directly in line and in control and balanced over the middle of your foot. But a big component of that is just developing the skill for that technique. Even if that means taking a lot of weight off of the bar, putting a range of motion limitation to where you can descend down in that full control with your, your trunk musculature staying more in line over the middle of your foot, taking weight off of the bar. A lot of times it just has to bring things back, even if that means taking a hit to your ego and starting to develop that movement pattern skill and the ability to control what you're doing and demonstrating the strength through that entire range of motion.